We will, we will be recording today's webinar, and it will be available within a week of today's live webinar. Welcome to all of our EMAT members, and thank you for attending. For those non-EMAT members on the webinar, we hope you will consider joining, and there's more information on the website for that. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we will be hearing from Matthew Marchetti. He is the Executive Director of CrowdSource Rescue, a Houston-based nonprofit that has helped rescue over 55,000 people during natural disasters by connecting them to nearby volunteers and first responders. As mentioned, CrowdSource Rescue was started as a grassroots effort in the wake of Hurricane Harvey in an attempt to better organize volunteer resources in a flooded West Houston neighborhood. It was able to help rescue over 25,000 people across that area by creating a map that connected volunteer rescuers with those who needed help. It has since evolved into a nonprofit and sits at the nexus of disaster response and spontaneous volunteer management. In partnership with numerous offices of emergency management and fire departments, it has helped be a force multiplier post-disaster and helping communities self-organize while ensuring vetted volunteers are able to safely help in the wake of the crisis. So with that, Matthew, I will open it up to you. Matthew?
Oh, crap.
Oh.
Oh, it's working?
It's working.
I'm glad I only said that. I was sitting there swearing at my computer. Yeah, sorry about that. Zoom froze on me for a second.
No worries. We've all been there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're just very lucky that it wasn't, something more profane. Anyways, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Matthew Marchetti. I am the Executive Director of CrowdSource Rescue. So I figured what we would do is go through a little bit of our origin story, talk about some of the disasters we've been a part of and where we're going into the future, and then how we can fit into some of your existing plans or help some of your agencies now, particularly with hurricane season upcoming. So as mentioned, I live in Houston, and I was out in a boat the first day of Hurricane Harvey in the Memorial area of Houston. And rescue is a very strong word for, what we were doing at that point. It was, more just water-based evacuation, moving people, particularly members of our church from from their homes to dry land, and started getting with other church members. We had 2 or 3 boats, and it just started to get complicated. We're really just working within 5 square miles. Can't get to any other part of the city, but other church members start calling us, and then friends of church members start calling us, and it just starts to get complicated. So I am a developer full-time along with my best friend, and we're both particularly we started in real estate software development, so maps make a lot of sense. So we're in this first day of Hurricane Harvey. It's getting real complicated. We don't know where other boats are, and we don't know where people who need help are. So we sit down and we make a real simple map. It just has 3 buttons. If you need to be rescued, there's a form. If you could help rescue, there's a form, and then there's a map that puts all that together. So here's the picture of the forms. I mean, we I think started working on this about midnight that first day. Stopped about 6 hours later at 6 a.m. Went to bed for a couple hours, and then woke up, and the map looked like this. And I can't repeat what I said, but it was something along the lines of waking up and seeing this and saying, "Oh my God, we are screwed." Because what are we going to do about this? We're just a couple of idiots with 2 boats in West Houston. Worse still, I had put my personal number on that site. because the whole plan for this is just to help organize rescues.
Hey, Matthew,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but somehow your screen has disappeared from earlier. Can you share it again?
No. So let me restart Zoom. Actually, I'll be on and off here for a minute, if that's okay, because I think I'm just having problems with Zoom. And can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds
All
great.
right.
And now we can see your screen.
Okay, take two. So make the little website in about 6 hours. Wake up Monday morning. It looks like this. I also put my personal number. And so I woke up with, no joke, 300 missed calls, my voicemail full. All these people calling, again, my personal cell phone number, asking, for help and to get rescued. And, I had these, terrible voice messages of people talking about being stuck in their attic and all this and all that. And the idea of having 300 missed calls is a little funny now. I can guarantee you that morning it was not funny. It was hands down probably the worst day of my life, because I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my God, we've made a huge mistake. This stupid website's gone viral. And now we've given all these people false hope. And again, what are we going to do about it? We have 2 boats. But something started happening that, by that afternoon, is the website started getting spread and spread and spread. People started pulling it up in their own neighborhood with boats and trucks and basically anything that floated. And they'd get on the website and say, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. And we didn't tell them to do this. It just started happening. People started self-organizing around it, and started going in their own neighborhood and going and getting people, driving them to the shelters, driving them wherever they needed to go, or and rescuing them just on their own. A couple days later, the map would look like this. So all told, it helped rescue around 25,000 people in the Houston area, as well as the Golden Triangle area, which I need to be very clear again. We didn't mean to do that. It was sheer unadulterated chaos, but for some reason it seemed to work. So we ended that week just, saying, well, wow, that was incredible. I'm going to tell my kids about this story. Just this one wild week in Hurricane Harvey. And for the most part, it said, okay, well, it's kind of on with the rest of our lives now. But around a week and a half later, Hurricane Irma hit in Florida, and people started using it again. So we kept the site up. And then a week or 2 later after that, Hurricane Maria hit in Puerto Rico, and people were using it, and it was helpful. And it was around that time where it's like starting to realize, like, okay, this is a thing now. It wasn't just this one-off thing that we did in Harvey. There's this consistent issue with people immediately post storm. You have this sort of interesting problem where there's a lot of volunteers who can help, particularly in their own neighborhoods, and they can help alongside emergency management, but a lot of it's just sort of the sheer unadulterated chaos. And so we start playing in the middle of this. Around 2018 is when emergency management agencies start reaching out. Houston Fire Department was really one of the first ones to reach out, essentially just calling and saying, what you got going on over here? There was a lot of learning in that early year, because again, before Hurricane Harvey, I didn't even know what an OEM was. We didn't know any of this. We didn't know what spontaneous volunteers were. We didn't know what FOAD were. I mean, all this was just brand new to us, but started to really kind of zero in on this idea and start zeroing in on this idea of spontaneous volunteers and how do we effectively use them during the response period of a major event, which again, I know how crazy that sounds. And I know some of the emergency management some of the emergency managers, y'all's hair is standing up saying, oh my God, volunteers in the response period. But what we started to see is like, well, a lot of these people are coming regardless. So we might as well put them to good and useful efforts. In 2018, I think one of I mean, a good example of that was Hurricane Florence. Um, it's almost a year after Harvey at this point. We've revamped the app. We have a mobile app now, and we're GPS tracking people. And in Hurricane Florence, there was about 5-ish thousand people who signed up to volunteer. And of those, around 80% lived in North Carolina. And, we're GPS tracking them, and they're rescuing within 5 miles of their house. So it's literally neighbors rescuing neighbors. But of the 20% that wasn't there, we're starting to see that it's a lot of these really smaller teams, but they're accomplishing, like the inverse, around 80% of the rescues. And a lot of these teams are, we call them civilian search and rescue teams. They're anywhere from 3 to 20 people on the team, and in varying degrees of training. But for the most part, they have training from your basic swift water training and CPR classes and all that, all the way up to like one of the teams, for instance, it's all ex-Coast Guard people, with their leader having taught at the Coast Guard Search and Rescue School for a number of years. I mean, really well qualified in terms of search and rescue and swift water rescue, for instance. And so we started to kind of branch off at this point, where it's like you have the spontaneous volunteers, like, for lack of a better word, it's just your average Joe who just wants to help, as well as some of these trained and equipped and self-sufficient search and rescue teams. And how do we bring these folks into the fold, working alongside emergency management, quickly vetting their capabilities, vetting their training, vetting their background, making sure they're not a criminal or anything like that, and then bringing them alongside the existing emergency management structure so that they can be helpful. Because as these storms get bigger and bigger, and I think everyone who went through Hurricane Harvey, we don't have to, I don't have to explain this, where it's like there hits this point where you have to turn to civilians, and we do have to have a collaborative community experience where civilians can be helpful. And if we can do that in a way, and we can structure safe ways for them to volunteer, I mean, it helps all of us. Let's see. So from 2017 to 2020, there's a number of storms. I mean, the big ones in our region, I think, was really just Imelda, unless I'm forgetting something. Sometimes they all run together at this point. Obviously, COVID came in 2020, changed a whole bunch of our daily lives, and still continues to change. Our friends at the Houston Food Bank called us up and said, hey, we had this issue of there's a number of our recipients who would be utilizing existing resources that are now canceled because of COVID. They don't have a car, they don't have transportation. And a lot of our food, particularly early on, they're saying, a lot of our food pantries are closed. What can we do about it? And essentially what us in the Houston Food Bank did is we used the same technology that CSR uses during our hurricane, essentially just to do the same thing except with food. So starting around March 2020, and it's ongoing today, and presumably forever, I mean, for the next couple of years at least. If somebody doesn't have transportation, they'll fill out a form, or they can call in to our hotline or the Houston Food Bank's hotline. That goes into a map where a volunteer sees it, goes to a food bank, takes the food, drops it off at their door. And that's for people without transportation, or if they might have medical issues, or they're bedridden. And since starting that, we've been able to help deliver around 800,000 meals. It so again, we kind of have this other pivot where it's like, well, yes, COVID's a disaster, but it's not really a natural disaster, but it needed doing. And, it's something that is so it's now just sort of an ongoing mission of ours in 11 counties to help deliver food. So all of this, natural disasters, pandemics, food delivery, and logistics, all of this comes to a head this year during the winter storm Uri, which I've only been doing this for what, I guess 4 years now ish, give or take. uh Winter storm Uri was definitely the most complicated, by far and away, storm that I've ever worked, because you have all of these issues that you might have in a natural disaster, um but it's a new hazard. The roads are tricky, you're kind of cut off just like you would be in a hurricane. We don't have power, which makes everything 10 times worse, and it's in the middle of a pandemic, and there's all these issues around the logistics and the supply chain. And so what we started doing early on was, it wasn't the best plan, but it was the plan that we had. um, because of our existing relationship, because of our existing mission with the food distribution, a lot of our clients were reaching out, and these are particularly older folks with uh, medical issues, or they had medical equipment. They'd be reaching out and saying, oh, hey, the power's off, it's 50 degrees in the house, it's 40 degrees in the house, it's 30 degrees in the house. And when it started to get below 40 degrees in the middle of the freeze, we had about 50 generators in our warehouse, and we would take them and run them to those places with a space heater, try and bring the temperature up, and just kind of leapfrog generators around. As the power situation kept going on, we started doing it, started using our high water vehicles, the big 6x6s, to move food and water around and start delivering food directly to folks. Once the power got turned back on, we're still, all of that's eclipsed by kind of the new problem that we find ourselves faced with, where it's, thousands and thousands of people simultaneously have not been able to go outside of their house for a week, because the roads have been iced over. They haven't had power, and we're faced with this issue where it's like there's a lot of vulnerable residents who, they already didn't have a tremendous amount of food in their pantry, and the water, there's all the water boil orders. So we partnered with a couple local breweries who, because they're breweries, they have these big, massive reverse osmosis filtering machines. And so that picture on the top right is one of the filling stations where we were trying to fill around, 3 to 5,000 gallons a day, and get that out with, with volunteers delivering it directly to their doorstep, both food and water. It was about 7,000. At one point it was 7,000 simultaneous requests in the Houston area, trying to get that all out. And we delivered to around 15,000 people. And I think that sort of, that whole experience is really, I sometimes look at it as a culmination, where it's like every previous storm and event, including COVID, sort of brought us to what we were able to do in the freeze. And it's sort of shaped a lot of our thinking for the future in terms of where we see our role. It's not only in this response role during a hurricane, where it's in the massive events like Harvey. You have you have tons of volunteers that you need to vet, and you need to see their resources, and particularly in rural areas, those volunteers can be very helpful. But obviously beyond that, you have these huge supply chain issues, where there's plenty of volunteers to help, but there's not like it's figuring out where your resources within the county or within the area, and how do we move those resources effectively, especially to those without transportation and without without the ability to get to the existing hub and spoke models. So some of the things that we've been working on, and a lot of this right now, with the storage container that I'm about to talk about, that's within Harris County, but we're trying to expand it throughout Texas and throughout the Gulf Coast. We've gotten a number of these old storage containers and we've converted them into little mobile, semi-mobile food pantries. And so we're using that during steady state, just as a way for volunteers to go to the storage container. They type in a little code like at an Amazon locker or Home Depot locker or something like that. Type in a little code, the locker pops open, they get the food, they drop it off to our client's house. But it also has the benefit of being able to be little mini warehouses almost, that we can drop in different areas pre-storm, and it'll have various disaster supplies like muck out kits and generators, as well as just extra food and water that we can use immediately after a storm. I think I've rambled, plenty. I don't have the time on me, but I always like to spend these time, and there's not a lot of us, it seems, with questions and back and forth, because I also know sometimes, particularly early on, like, the idea of spontaneous volunteers in a response period, that scares everybody. But I need to be very clear that we're not advocating in, telling people, oh, just jump in a boat and just go crazy with it. A lot of what we try to do is serve as sort of that catch where when people start turning to social media and when people start requesting help on social media, ideally they don't. Ideally 911, it all works within the 911 system, but sometimes they do, and there needs to be an answer there, and we try and catch those folks, and try and put them into good and useful purposes. So at that, any questions or thoughts, or anybody want to yell at me?
Thank you, Matthew. It looks like if there are any questions, you can type them in the chat box. Jennifer, can a participant unmute themselves if they'd rather ask the question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they have two options. Type it in the chat box, or if you'd like to just start asking the questions verbally, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay, hearing none, we can go ahead and let everybody go. Matthew, thank you so much. Great presentation, a lot of great information there, and thank you for all that you guys have done, beginning with Harvey and definitely since all of the disasters that the state has had to encounter since. The webinar will be posted on the EMAT website in the next week, so please look forward to that and share it with colleagues that weren't able to make it today. And if that is it, then we will see you guys in a couple of weeks. We appreciate it.
And if I could have one last pitch.
Sure.
So first, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I guess my one last ask is, so much of what we've been able to accomplish, it might sound amazing on paper, but particularly in the Harris County area, it's only because we've had hours and hours of meetings with Harris County area emergency management agencies and volunteer fire departments. And it's because, we have close relationships with, because we're Harris County based, we have close relationships with our local departments and agencies. And something I like to say is, we just want to be friends. We want to be helpful. That is by far and away, our most powerful assets is our relationships with emergency management agencies and with local departments. And so if anything, just dropping an email just to say hello. We're a friendly bunch. That relationships are the absolute most powerful thing that we have. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. And I promise we don't bite. We're not here just to screw up everyone's day.
Thank you very much for everything, Matthew. Great presentation.
So Matthew, can I ask a question right quick?
Yes.
This is Michelle Mead with Brazos County. So I would be curious and probably having further discussions about this resource. What is the best way to reach out to you? I assume email is, and I apologize because I'm driving. But is email the best way to reach out to you?
Email's good. I'm dropping my cell phone in the chat. That's also good. However, you're probably going to have to send me a text or a voicemail because I don't pick up numbers I don't know if it's not
Correct.
a hurricane. Yeah, and we're active in Brazos County with the food distribution with the Brazos Valley Food Bank. And we've met a couple times. Is Leslie still at your office, or he might be at Texas A&M's office?
Leslie Lutz, no, he's down in the CEOC with us.
Yeah. I actually live in Brazos County. I'd love to come over and meet with y'all and talk a little bit more about it too.
Because the other thing I would be interested in finding out is what is the best way to reach out to you in the event that something happens and we could use your resources.
So that always goes a couple different ways. If we already have a relationship, half the time it's just texting one of us in our duty phones, and I can send those along. But for anyone else, our 24/7 email, which is truly monitored 24/7, is connect@crowdsourcerescue.org. And if it's an activation request, like, we want to put the map up, or it's always, and this kind of goes back to like where the relationship is good, because sometimes it's not like, we need to put this map up and, all these hundreds of thousands of volunteers. Sometimes it's, hey, we really need a big truck and one of our local departments, high water vehicle is down. Can we borrow one of your trucks, and everything in between. On that note, we do, that's sort of a ADD side mission of ours is we take in, people will donate flat bottom boats to us, and we'll rehab them and then give them out to local departments, particularly rural departments, who might not have, budget for some of this stuff, as well as some of the large high water vehicle trucks. And the email, and I'll drop it in the chat, it's connect@crowdsourcerescue.org. And all of us see that and can respond to it 24/7.
It's definitely an interesting concept, and yes, the first reaction is, oh my gosh.
No, and your first reaction is not wrong either. I mean, yeah, it's and again, I have to be very careful, like, and very precise, where it's like, we're not advocating for these sorts of volunteers to come out. What we're saying is, well, if they do, we can put them to good work.
Gotcha. I appreciate the information. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and we hope to see you guys soon.
Take care, y'all. Hopefully not too soon.
That's right.
Thank you. Bye.